Nothing makes your writing better than having somebody else look at it, because even before you show it to them, even if they've got no feedback for you, the act of getting it ready to show kind of puts you on the spot, makes you up your game a little bit. Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 2. I'm going to share my slides here. One second. Alrighty, if I've done this right, then y'all should be looking at some slides, and just scooting all of Zoom's many floating tool palettes around and hiding the ones I don't need. I am keeping the chat window open so I can see how people are replying, and I'm trying to keep the gallery open as well, in case folks want to jump in and ask questions verbally as well. Jumping in at any time is welcome. All right, so welcome again to day 2 as we turn our attention kind of out from the self and out to our teams to mentoring and leading others. I have the very happy task of kicking off this topic for you. We've got some really heavy hitters coming today to talk to us about burnout, to talk to us about building high-performing teams. And I am so excited to get to set the stage for those discussions to follow, and to bring some energy to this topic that I hope will get us through the day. So this talk is about building the habits of writing and reflection, and how this became a superpower for me as I was developing my leadership skills, and how I believe it can also be a superpower for you as well. I took on a challenge of writing 50 short items, some as short as a paragraph, some maybe article length, about leadership, to train myself how to become a manager. So a punchier title for this talk could have been 50 articles in 50 weeks. So when I reflect on why I'm so excited about this summit, I'm very eager to get the chance to learn more about how to mentor and lead. I imagine that's why many of you are here as well. But I actually would like to take some time and talk about that. So I was going to ask, like, okay, what are you hoping to get out of this this particular talk and this conference generally? And Karen has amazingly and awesomely primed the pump for that. So I'd like to go through a few of these items now, and we'll visit a couple of them as we go on. So Sam asked about setting aside time for writing. There is an article in my collection about making the time to write, and we have a few on getting into the right headspace or getting more efficient. And I don't know if the things I do are to help myself do this are universal, but I'm happy to share. I have ADHD, and it is very easy to not do important stuff sometimes. So I have lots of different coping techniques, whether it's blocking aside time on Friday afternoons to work on this project, setting alarms, disabling notifications, disabling social media apps. I have a whole recipe to walk through this process of like putting on the right playlist for writing, and having my apps automatically launch and arrange themselves. And all of that goes into one of the recipes. I believe I do have some screenshots of that particular recipe. We can certainly talk about it. So if it's helpful for anybody else, that would make me very happy. And as far as practical tips on becoming a better writer, thank you, Alexandria, for that. The two things that have helped me most, one are writing lots, and the second is showing it to people. Nothing makes your writing better than having somebody else look at it, because even before you show it to them, even if they've got no feedback for you, the act of getting it ready to show kind of puts you on the spot, makes you up your game a little bit. So volume and sharing. And let's see, impactful kinds of documents to write. Thank you, Cecily. I haven't really considered that, but I'd love to to bring that one up at the end of the talk during the kind of open discussion period, because I think I want to get some buy-in from some other folks here, some ideas. So back to this why we're here, to learn about mentoring and leadership, and to how to use the habit of writing and reflection to boost those skills. However, I've added a footnote now to this, because writing and reflection are very individual habits, and I want to acknowledge that we don't lead in a vacuum. And building skills can help us become more successful. By themselves, they are not the only thing that determines our success, right? Our success as leaders depends on the institution around us and its support. Our success depends on how healthy our workplace culture is. It depends on seeing people like us recognized for their work and represented in leadership. And even though writing is such an individual habit, we will see this acknowledgement that we don't lead in a vacuum. We will see this leak into a few of the recipes that we talk about. All right, so why 50 articles on management? Well, I was a couple years ago, I was new to the management role. I've been a tech leader for a long time, but having the word manager in my title was a new thing for me. And I knew that there would be new skills to build, new habits to practice, new questions to ask. And so I was asking myself these questions like, what new situations am I going to encounter? What skills and habits will I need? What things have I not even thought to ask yet? And as an example of that, some of the things that I knew would be new to me were setting expectations. It's very different coming from a manager than it is coming from a peer. And I knew I would have to learn how to navigate that. Another might be writing performance reviews, defining roles for hiring, writing a promotion pitch. That was something I'd never done as an individual contributor. And not only that, these were just the things I knew that I would need to learn. There were, of course, a bunch of other things that I didn't even know what to ask about yet. So definitely a daunting task to come to terms with a new role. But anybody here who's contemplating doing this or has done this, we know we're not starting from square one. Right? We've been absorbing leadership lessons our whole careers. Whether we've been inspired by a specific leader and we want to emulate them, whether we've seen a practice be really effective, or whether we've seen a disaster and just want to learn how to avoid it. I'd like to give a couple of examples of things I learned about leadership just by experiencing it, like watching it from someone else or kind of experiencing it with them. So the first one is about setting expectations. So I had this amazing manager at New Relic. Her name is April, and she is the first person that made me want to be a manager. I think I would have answered the question, would you ever want to be a manager, with heck no. But after working with April, the answer would have been maybe someday. And she had this knack of getting you to lead yourself to the change that that you needed to make. So she would, in a one-on-one, she might ask you something like, "Hey, how do you think that meeting went?" And you might answer, "Well, let's see, they asked question A and I answered with answer B, and then we had this discussion. Oh, I screwed that up, didn't I? I should have done that better." And she was so effective at this and so subtle. I had a name for this. I called it the Jedi mind trick. And I still have the original notes that I took when I went to her later and said, "How the heck did you do that? Like, how did you trick me into figuring out what the right thing was and then going and doing it without ever like issuing a direct request?" And I still have those notes. These are, as far as I can tell, exactly as I typed them into my phone that day. They have been imported, exported, copied, and pasted across probably 5 different note-taking systems between then and now. This conversation took place about 6 or 7 years ago, but I've kept this piece of treasure because it's that important and that beautiful. And we met several times to talk about this, to talk about other leadership things. She would bring things to me as well, maybe a question about information architecture or copy editing. And I had this realization after we met several times, like, wait a minute, this is what mentoring is. We've been doing mentoring this whole time. And this gets to what we learned yesterday around mentorship doesn't always have to be this formal thing where I kneel and offer up to you my sword and we sign an ironclad contract. The third Thursday of every month at 3:30 shall be the time of the meeting, and the Starbucks on the corner shall be the location. It's fine to have formal arrangements like that, but that's not the only way to have a mentorship relationship. And not only that, as we talked about, as we learned about yesterday, a true mentorship is a learning partnership where the mentor is perhaps seeking out things from the person they're mentoring as well. Okay, so that is the Jedi mind trick. We'll see that more in more detail later. But another example of something I learned about leadership just by having it kind of happen to me. Yes, Emily, there should definitely be more swords. Is when the composition of a team changes. So when you as a senior contributor join a new team, or maybe you get a new manager, or the composition of your team changes so much that it's practically a new team. There's this notion of, there's all these kinds of leadership-y tasks. Who does what? And here's a purely hypothetical example. Imagine you're on a team where, you know, the lead engineer owns architecture and is responsible for code review, for leading code review. It doesn't mean doing it all. And meanwhile, the manager does hiring, compensation, performance, that kind of stuff. But maybe both of them work together on setting the roadmap for the team. Maybe both of them participate in mentoring newer engineers. Then you join a new team and maybe this manager is really hands-on. Maybe they wrote this code 5 years ago and they want to be involved in code review because they want to help people avoid pitfalls. They know where all the dragons are. On the other hand, maybe this manager doesn't want to be involved in the roadmap. Maybe there's a dedicated product org and they expect the lead engineer to go work it out with product. So the decision of who does what is, the allocation of who does what is different between these two fictional teams. But in general, we see that some things are almost always the domain of the engineer, like owning the code, owning the architecture. Some are almost always the domain of the manager. Again, things like hiring, performance, compensation. But there are some leadership roles, habits, tasks, processes that could belong to one of them or the other or both. And that was kind of the realization I had. It's like every manager is different, every senior engineer is different. And we often end up finding out in retrospect, oh, this manager is really hands-on with the code. I wasn't expecting that. So the realization is we're going to end up negotiating these roles anyway. We might as well do it mindfully. And so now the wisdom that comes out of this is that when our team composition changes, it's worth the manager and the senior individual contributors sitting down and negotiating who does what leadership stuff. So these are just two lessons on leadership that I just sort of absorbed from the leaders around me or my relationship with them. And there are lots more, but all this is to illustrate this has been happening to everyone here as well. You've been absorbing things about leadership as well. So two insights from mid-career Erin, the Jedi mind trick and the as yet unnamed Venn diagram thing of who does what. So these have been percolating around in my memory, but what's the cue? Like, what do we need to know? It's time to take this hard-earned lesson and apply it. Well, one thing, it helps to have a name. We've got that for one of these. We might as well try to find a name for the other one, the Venn diagram who does what thing. So let's turn to the world of satire on television. Let's look at the conjoined triangles of success from fictional CEO Jack Barker. I love this. We have like a double y-axis, always a great thing to have on a chart. Engineering on one y-axis, sales on the other. Somehow as growth increases, engineering decreases. This is This is just great chart junk. I love it. So in a humorous nod to this brilliant satire of corporate charts, well, let's call these the conjoined ellipses of leadership. So this is the same stuff we saw earlier, right? The senior IC is going to own some stuff, the manager is going to own some other stuff, but all the stuff in the middle are things that either one of them or both of them could own. And this is the chart that I would at least mentally reference when a team changes significantly. Okay, so what do we need to apply these? Now we've got names. We need to know when to use it. Well, we have that, right? We use the Jedi mind trick when we know we need to ask somebody to make a change. We know we use the conjoined ellipses of leadership when our team changes significantly. And we need to know what to do. And these are starting to sound like this phenomenon in software, design patterns, where if we encounter the same situation over and over and over again in software, it helps a lot to name it and to codify it, so that if two developers are saying, yeah, well, this object needs to know about what changes are happening with this object, but we don't want them to get tightly coupled. So we'll use the observer pattern, and observer is a named design pattern you can go and look up, and you can read through how to apply it to your situation. So this is my realization. These are almost like leadership design patterns. And these tiny treasures of information, it's kind of percolated around my subconscious for years. And sometimes in my conscious thought, they just sort of became the background sound of my career until it was time to become a manager. So I'd like to talk about that for a little bit. Leadership has looked very, very different throughout my career. Early career leadership was mostly teaching, helping someone else gain a skill. As I grew into more senior roles, leadership became advocacy, saying, hey, these practices worked on my team. Here was the positive impact. Maybe they'll work on your team, providing coaching, providing support, helping steer a wider organization toward change. Then leadership became about mentoring, onboarding, trying to level up everyone around me, becoming a force multiplier. And as I came to my current job at Briza, about 6 months into this job, as my team was growing, I wanted to stay connected to my teammates as we grew. So I started having regular one-on-ones with them. We had done this at Stitch Fix, engineer to engineer one-on-ones, and they were super valuable. So I started doing that here. And by the way, having one-on-ones with your peers is a super helpful habit to build. It's a great way to unearth unhealthy situations, whether it's in the workplace culture or your relationship with management, because the last thing you want is to be thinking, oh, I thought it was just me. And your peer is thinking, I thought it was just me. And your other teammate is thinking, oh, I thought it was just me, and no one knowing. So we started having one-on-ones just to make sure that we were on top of any changes and in touch with sort of the pulse of our team health. And what I started noticing is the topic of these one-on-ones often drifted toward building skills and growing careers. Somebody might have a skill they wanted to build around advocacy and presentation skills. And like, sure enough, here's this project that we need to convince the organization is worth doing, and probably have this engineer lead it as well. So let's work a little bit on a good presentation and anticipating what the objections or questions are going to be and building that right into the slides. Let's mentor this person a little bit on on advocacy, on making a great argument. And then let's see if we can get them on that project. And this happened a few times. And I had this feeling, wow, this is an amazing feeling. When you find like a person and an opportunity, and you're able to connect them together. And as the organization grew and we needed managers, I submitted my name as an internal candidate. 2 engineers did, actually. And the organization gave us good support. They had multiple leadership training sessions for every leader of the company, CEO down to brand new managers in training. They started to gradually roll out management responsibilities to us, beginning with performance reviews and then building from there. And I started seeking out a lot of stuff on my own. A lot of these engineering management blogs that I've been reading for years were now suddenly super, super relevant to my situation. Reading books, taking courses at the co-working space where we work. So I was learning a lot of things quickly. And I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes when we have a new piece of knowledge, I don't know, sometimes I'll either forget it immediately or I'll super carefully write it down and keep it in a super safe place and then never look at it again. I wanted to avoid either of those outcomes. I wanted to do better. So I decided to build a collection of short articles on leadership. Again, I gave myself sort of a 1-year 50 article challenge. I adopted a very forgiving definition of the word article. Some of these articles are literally just a paragraph or just a sketch of an idea. Some of them are fully fleshed out with cross references and external quotes and details and diagrams. All of this is valid. And I wanted this to be lighthearted because if it's too serious, I'm just not going to do it. So I decided to call it a grimoire, like a spell book. I wanted this to be something I was excited to contribute to. And I wanted it to have a feeling of whimsy and maybe like a little bit of magic. So that the items in the grimoire, I tend to call them recipes or sometimes spells, usually recipes. And I'd like to share several of these with you. Before I do that, I just want to say this, I'm not necessarily saying these are all leadership tips for you. I chose these hoping that they are generally applicable, but I'm going to be cracking open my skull here, kind of pouring my soul out. We're going to be gazing at it, dissecting it together. It's a little bit of a vulnerable moment. So all this to say, I'm highlighting these recipes more to show aspects of what I think makes, in general, a good recipe. But before I get to that, now that we've kind of framed things this way, are there any things you've encountered in your career that would be like a recipe, a leadership recipe, a habit, a practice, a skill that you found useful or that you've seen someone else do and you've admired? Asking the right questions. That's a good one. Recognizing good work in the team, 100%. And deep listening. Yes, Olivia, checking in without imposing a rigid template or perspective. Listening, yeah, we have another one for deep listening. I'm loving these. I'm getting way more of these than that were beyond even my wildest hopes. Challenging the team in a good way. I hope we're saving the chats from these too, because these are brilliant. Reframing the problem. Reading between the lines is a brilliant one. Okay, I'm loving these. Thank you all. All right, so here are a couple of the recipes from the grimoire. First, around skills. So these were the things I knew that I would need to learn how to do, such as handling conflict. So this first recipe is about handling conflict. And I'm just going to point out a couple things about it. One is I decided after making a few of these to start adding tags to them so that I could say, oh, all of these recipes are about handling conflict, or these other recipes are around coaching. I could build topic specific guides. Also, at the suggestion of my manager at the time, Kyle, I started connecting it to my values. So I could see which recipes are related to the value of curiosity, let's say. So the recipe has tags, it has some kind of nod to the source. Did this come from my fevered imagination? Did this come from a specific conversation or an article or a book? When do I need to apply it? If someone's been prickly, it's cactus time. I don't want to get poked, but we do need to talk about it. What do I do? And then a recipe has ingredients. Some of these recipes have more exciting ingredients lists than others. A lot of these just say paper. And then there's the ritual itself. So it's quite a lengthy ritual because there are a lot of details for each edge case. For example, what's giving me pause about having this discussion? Am I nervous to even start, or am I ready to start but not sure which approach to take? Or am I concerned about where to lead the conversation? So depending on which one of these I choose, then there's more specific details. So just to pick one example, let's say I'm ready to start having the talk. I'm in the right headspace and heart space for it, but I need to know how to lead it, how to direct it, how to not let it get out of control. So here's some advice on that, and notice that it delegates the heavy lifting to another recipe, the Jedi mind trick that we already talked about. So just from this recipe, we've seen that an informal set of tags can help organize. This was a surprise. I did not set out to start tagging these things, but it actually turned out to be useful. It's good to cite the source for a recipe. Not that I'm going to be publishing this thing anywhere, but just to know where it came from. So if I have follow-up questions, I can go consult the source. And then finally, recipes can link to each other, which was, again, not something I expected going in, but interlinking ideas turned out to be one of the most powerful aspects of this. All right, here's another recipe. This is about making change across a team. I'm just going to highlight the specific parts here. Change your own thinking and hope it leads to new behavior, or change your behavior and hope it leads to new thinking. So the ritual is basically, there's more to it than this, but I clipped out the most relevant sentence, which is ask your team. So let's say we know that we need to change the way we deliver features to customers. Maybe just ad hoc shipping it 7 times a day on GitHub at random times throughout the day is not scaling anymore. And we need to know, like, what's a better, more mindful way to release features. We might still continuously deliver, but maybe we don't launch them yet. So I would ask my team, what would it look like if we had a fantastic feature rollout process that met our needs and our customers' needs? Or fill in the blank. We will know when we've got the right feature release process when we see our teammates do X, when we see our customers do X. And then there's more to the ritual from here, but this is the important part. And then the realization, this sort of act as if it's already happened. This is like a more honest version of fake it till you make it. Because you're not really faking it. You're speculatively time traveling into the future and then faking it. So what have we seen that is new in this recipe? Well, it may be based not just on a conversation, but on a quote. So recipe can have a quote. It can have a link to the source material. The hyperlink in my quote takes me to the highlight in that Kindle book where I highlighted that. So if I want to find out, well, okay, but how did he actually lead that meeting? I can go read that story. And recipes can have a section at the end, any of these sort of aha moments that popped up while I was implementing it or writing it or whatnot. So the last skill-based recipe I'm going to show you is around big picture team stuff, when it's time to write a team charter, or when it's time to come up with working agreements or yearly goals. The ritual for this is very long, but I just want to zoom in on the ingredients list and point out here the ingredients aren't literal. So at the advice of my manager at the time, Kyle, he encouraged me to really think metaphorically on ingredients. What structures and relationships need to be in place for this recipe to be usable, successful? If I'm going to be, my team's got a plan for the half year and it needs something from another team or from the wider org, do I have the relationships with senior management to go advocate for that? Is this workplace the kind of place that supports team autonomy for something on this scale? So that was the realization here, that ingredients can be metaphorical or structural. So this is what I was getting at when I said we don't lead in a vacuum. That some of our success depends on the structures around us. So pausing a second to say, Karen points out that Obsidian is a potential place to keep a grimoire. That is exactly where I keep my grimoire. It's also where I wrote my slides. So it's a web server running inside an Obsidian extension. So the next set of recipes are about habits I wanted to build. So here's one in particular. It's not about me. So this one begins with a quote from a Kathy Sierra book, Badass. And her book was kind of focused on product design. Like if you make a camera, sure, it's fine if your customers say this is an awesome camera, but what's way better is if your customers say, wow, I'm awesome at taking great pictures. And that's the mindset to get in. And it turns out this is a useful mindset for management as well. Like I don't need my team to say you're a good manager. I'll know whether or not I'm doing well by how they're succeeding. I want my teammates to say, I'm awesome, meaning like, you know, they're saying this about themselves. I want my teammates to say, wow, we crushed that. And quick question from Stephanie here. What do we do when external factors are limiting our ability? So there's a hint of it in that recipe, in that if there's a relationship that we don't have, it's time to like build those relationships and lay that groundwork before you need this recipe. So I know I'm kind of glossing over a huge topic by just saying build relationships, but that's like having a mentor or a sponsor or a champion can also be a great place to kind of start to put those structures in place. Okay. So this ritual, the contents of it are more just about reflect on these very specific quotes from Badass and consider what are the gaps between what I'm doing to empower my team to go be badasses themselves, and like what are the gaps between what I am doing and what I should be doing to unlock that. So this is a habit to practice regularly. So another habit to build, you know, my boss said, don't fill up your Fridays. Fridays are tailor-made for reflection. We're low on energy. We don't really have time to start anything new. Don't waste this. So this recipe contains the checklist and some of the automation that I would use to get into the right headspace for writing. So I would have a link to the playlist to listen to. I have a link to this app called Bunch that will launch the apps that I need for writing, close everything else, and arrange it exactly as I want it on my monitors. There's also automation for how to start my weekly note, which is built off of a template, and so forth. So these recipes can be almost like code. They can be like a little procedure that you and your computer are following together. Another class of recipe, kind of an unexpected one. These are more general, it's just mindsets to get into. So this is much more nebulous than a specific habit I'm building. And instead, this is something I need to remember about my job. And for example, I have a recipe called Everything You Know Is Wrong. So it begins with this brilliant song lyric from Weird Al's zany 1990s tribute to They Might Be Giants. And when we're managers, it is so easy to feel like we're screwing up all the time because people tend to come to us when something's broken. If things are going great, they're tending to stay by themselves and keep working, which means that most of what we hear is bad news, and it can feel like everything's wrong or we're doing everything wrong. And this recipe is a reminder that, like, no, like this is sort of sampling bias. I'm mostly hearing about wrong stuff because that's my job. And it doesn't mean that I don't need to fix these things, and it doesn't mean that it's not valid to feel anxious sometimes. But this recipe was to help me get into the right perspective. So I put a lot of in jokes and to myself and cultural references for myself in these recipes because this is what helps keeping it coming back to the writing project, keeping it relevant, keeping it memorable. One other mindset to get into, I had this habit of saying things like qualifying what I was about to say with, well, I know I'm new at management, but ... And my peer manager, Laura here, said, yeah, you got to stop that. Stop saying you're new at this. So watch out for things like, you know, while I'm new at this, and just instead say I've observed or based on my experience, because the reality is anyone here thinking of going into management has a wealth of experience to draw on. Everybody's new at something, right? But we've got experience to draw on, and we shouldn't shortchange ourselves. So kind of wrapping up here, there were a lot of joys about this project. It really surprised me. And one of them was, well, here's a common structure for what these grimoire recipes have. And this came at the suggestion of my colleague Laura. As she was reviewing an early draft of these, she said, you know, it'd be great if these all had this common structure so it'd be easy to navigate and jump right to where you want. I thought that was a brilliant suggestion. So I built a template in Obsidian, and when I create a new note in that folder, it will get auto-populated from this template. Don't forget to add tags, add a relevant quote if needed, and so forth. So that was the first unexpected joy of this. There's joy in finding common structure to your ideas later. Another joy, so here's a kind of tag cloud of the items in the grimoire. And what I love about this is, like, my values are metaphorically, but also quite literally at the center of this. The type size is pretty small, but we have humor and intention and empathy and so forth. And then the recipes flow out from there, and they're deeply interconnected as well. Zooming in a little bit, here's like the value of intention. We have the conjoined ellipses of leadership here. We have some other ones I haven't talked about here. So that was the second unexpected joy, is there's joy in connecting ideas. Knowledge isn't this static thing that just gets put into a note-taking system and never looked at again. And because every time we connect an idea to another, we end up looking at that idea, maybe revisiting it, tweaking it, making it better. Certainly, even if we don't change it, it cements it in our memory. So the next unexpected joy, when I got feedback from a few trusted people, I was able to publish to a private password protected site and get some much needed feedback on these. And as I said, that was kind of a vulnerable moment, but this did level up my writing to the question that got asked earlier about building writing skills. Because even before I'd switched on the publish switch and made this available, even before I generated passwords for my reviewers, knowing that it was going to be seen made me go and clean up some of the more embarrassingly short articles or embarrassingly sketchy ones. And I got brilliant feedback on it as well. So I improved my writing from knowing I was about to share it and also from the act of sharing it. So there is joy in connecting the ideas, but also in sharing the ideas. Finally, I started using a kind of a writing queue during my Friday, don't fill up your Fridays time. I would have my writing queue automatically assign me an article. Any article tagged with needs work would get brought up and suggested for me to write on. And so even if I'm just adding a sentence or a paragraph, over time, several of these articles are kind of rising gradually to be good enough not to need the needs work tag anymore. So there's joy in revisiting the ideas, and that's how they really become cemented in my memory, is from looking back at them and manipulating them, linking them and remixing them and combining ideas or splitting ideas. Because I kind of learned by talking things out, whether out loud or metaphorically into my computer. So I will say I hesitated even to mention tools. Really, whatever tool you have is the best tool for this. You can do this in plain text files on your phone, on your computer. If you do it in fancy note-taking software, some tools might be easier than others, but no matter what, you use what you have, use what you're familiar with what you like. The things that I found helpful for this are being able to go from, ooh, I have an idea, to like having a document open and typing instantly or near instantly. And as we talked about before, all the linking and tagging and templates and sharing options. So 1 year later, and 50 odd entries in the grimoire, counting table of contents and sort of content map pages. What happened? Well, this past year and a half has been one of the biggest times for professional growth of my entire career. I know I've got a long way to go, and I'm really excited to keep on down the road. I know we're pushing time, but I'd like to hold space for a couple of questions, and I also want to revisit one of the earlier comments. But before I do that, in case we do run out of time, thank you all for taking the time to be with me today, and looking forward to chatting with you.
Wow, Erin, that was amazing. Blew my mind. So much inspiration on taking better notes and getting myself in that mindset. We are rushed on time, but I think we can start the next session a little later. So there are a couple of questions in the chat here. You actually touched on a number of them, but here's a question. Any tips about which blogging platform to choose? Been looking at a few, and I'm not quite sure where to start.
Oh goodness, it's been ages since I had a blog. Any other bloggers want to chime in?
Okay, we have Medium in the chat. Substack.
Ooh, 750 words.
Yeah,
I'm going to click on that one right now.
And then another one here, would love to learn tips on how to make concise, impactful documents to build consensus and align on next steps. So if you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, this is something we have to do a lot here as engineers writing RFCs, requests for comment to advocate for a feature. And a couple things have served as well. One is anticipating what all the questions and objections are going to be by talking to a couple people first, or just knowing this is what I would ask if I were against this project, and building those into your argument. Another is showing that you've considered alternatives. We considered this. Here's the reasons why it could have been a good fit, but here's why we think our chosen approach would be a better fit. And finally, to do those in stages. If you're going to construct an argument first, see if you can get buy-in on the fact that we're doing this task at all, and get some consensus on that first, and then go into the how, go into the implementation stages and plans. The worst thing in the world is to, spend a week writing a huge detailed plan and then have someone say like no to the entire idea before they even see the implementation stages.
Absolutely. And then our last question here until we have to hop to the next one. Do you have any tips on different formats that are appropriate for different goals? There's designs, project, retros, proposals.
Yeah, this is the one that I really wanted to throw out to the wider team and say what documents have you written that have had the biggest impact, most bang for the letter.
So anybody in the chat, feel free to be in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and join in the conversation of different documents and formats that you've written. Yeah, we have GitHub in the chat. All right, so we're all still figuring it out, which is completely fine. And if anything, go ahead, Erin.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, one thing in my experience has been super impactful is, like at Stitch Fix, we call them architecture decision record, which is not only the decision we decided about the architecture, here's how we're going to structure data, whatever, but here's why. Here's why we as a group decided this is the way we want to go. That's not to make that irreversible, but it does save you from a little bit of whiplash and back and forth, because before somebody reverses that decision, they're going to go look up how the current decision came to be, and having those be numbered, sequential, sitting in a folder, able to be referred to. A little bit like the Python programming language community has Python enhancement proposals. And some of those have become standards on how you write Python, like PEP 8 about like how you structure, how you format your code.
Amazing. Okay, so we are a little bit over time. There's a poll here. Would love everybody's feedback. So take a couple of seconds to answer this poll, and then let's hop over to the next session, where we'll be having discussions around burnout and how to manage it.
Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Erin. This has been a great presentation. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.